People love to live in the hillside homes in Oakland and Berkeley because the views are so beautiful. Parking is pretty bad, but the views are wonderful, so people live in those homes. Now, these homes can be very dangerous, and I'm going to show you in this video why they're dangerous and the catastrophic damage that occurred in the North Ridge earthquake. So this is probably the most important video I will ever make. It can save lives, and hopefully what you see here you can spread to other people so that they know how dangerous their homes may be. This is a hillside home that had a beautiful view in the Los Angeles basin. And as you can see, this house right here is nothing but rubble. Absolutely nothing left of it. It looks like something that was taken to the dump or was bulldozed. And these hillside homes like this that have the wonderful views, they can end up looking like this. Now, there were 24 people that died in these hillside homes in the Northridge earthquake, so it's a very serious concern. So this damage here is similar to the damage right here, but not nearly as severe. Not all the hillside homes in Los Angeles were destroyed, but enough to be a very serious concern. Now, the Los Angeles Building Code was changed. It used to use plywood to resist earthquakes, and now which is part of the building code currently, and now it uses special methods called secondary and primary anchors, which we're going to be looking at in this video. Here's another home that suffered catastrophic damage, and as you can imagine, if someone had been in that house when the earthquake hit, they wouldn't have survived. They wouldn't have survived, or they would have been severely injured. This sort of damage that happens to these hillside homes is very serious, and it's life-threatening. And Bay Area Retrofit, one of our highest priorities is, if we can, we retrofit these houses to make them as safe as possible. And we're very pleased when we can do that because we know that we might have saved the lives of one of our neighbors. There are actually two types of hillside homes. There's the uphill hillside home, and the hillside home is, pretty much just like a home that's built on the flats. On the flats, you have a flat lot, and someone came in and dug out the hill to make the lot flat along here. And because it's a flat lot, it reacts just like a house in the flats of Berkeley or Oakland, which takes a cripple wall retrofit or another type of retrofit for regular houses. However, if you come over here, and this is a downhill hillside home, you see something different. This is a very steep slope. And right down here, you see a step foundation. We're going to look at the step foundation in just a minute. So it's the ones that are on the downhill side where you see these steps. The steps really tell you if it's a steep hillside home or not. Now, the more steps, the worse. And we'll take a look at steps and see why they are dangerous. You don't need to understand a lot of engineering to understand why these homes fail like they do. It's really a matter of common sense, in my opinion. So what happens first is this plywood right here is stiffer than this one, and this one is stiffer than this one. The reason they're stiffer is this one is stiff because it's short. And then this one is a little taller, and therefore it is more flexible. And then this one is even more flexible. So what happens in an earthquake, because this is the stiffest element and will absorb all the force first, earthquake force goes here until that fails. Then it goes here until that fails, and then it goes in here until that fails. So let's say there's 24 feet of plywood along this whole wall, and the engineer figured out how much earthquake force was needed to be resisted, and so he designed it. He took the California Building Code and he said, well, it needs 24 linear feet of plywood. However, what happens in the actual earthquake, assuming this is, again, this is 24 feet across, and this is 8 feet, and this is 8 feet, and this is 8 feet. What it actually means is, the way it works is he'll only have 8 feet at any one time. So he'll have 8 feet of resistance. So this shear wall right here, it will fail. Then this one will fail, and then this one will fail. So at any one time, even though the wall was supposed to have 24 linear feet of earthquake resistance, it only has 8 feet. And if you consider a house is, say, 50,000 pounds, it's clearly not enough. This diagram should help you understand a little bit better. This represents a plywood shear wall. A shear wall means it's got the bolts and all that other stuff. We'll just call it plywood. So here's the plywood here on our shear wall. And what happened is, this has been damaged by an earthquake. And what happened here is this short one right here, it failed first. And then after it failed, then this one failed. And then after it failed, then this one failed. And then finally you come down here where the wall is very flexible. And because it's flexible, it was just able to deflect a little bit up here at the top. But it did not fail here at the bottom simply because it would bend, because it's flexible. So flexibility is the big issue here in these hillside homes. So here's a foundation from one of the homes that suffered catastrophic collapse. And as you can see, this is stepped. Step foundation is a big clue that this is a hillside home. And if you look from here up to here, that's the floor. So here's the floor, and this would have been the top of the foundation. So let's say that was 8 feet. We'd have another one here at, say, 6 feet, another one here at 4 feet, another one here at, let's say 16 inches. And then there's number one here, something like a foot. So those are just approximations. So what would happen is this one would fail first because it's the shortest. And remember, it's the stiffest and the shortest is the one that fails. And then this one would fail because it is the next stiffest. And then this one would fail, and then this one would fail, and then this one would fail. And once they would all fail, the house would collapse down the hill. So right here, this is down the hill. This is up the hill. And so that's how these homes fail. These hillside homes fail in earthquakes. This is a case where earthquake forces are trying to push the house down in this direction. Now what's happening is the floor is trying to go down the hill, and these cripple walls right here, they're on a step foundation, so they're collapsing and unzipping, so they're not doing us any good. And the only way we can save this house is if we put a lot of strength in these corners. So if we can keep this corner to the foundation and this corner on the foundation, the house will stay on the foundation and we won't have that catastrophic damage. Here's a good illustration of how a house became separated from the uphill foundation and fell down the hill. Now, it had been attached to this piece of wood right here. Now, that's called a ledger. You may have heard of that before. And when it pulled away from the ledger, and then the house fell down the hill. Now, this foundation right here, if we had been able to keep the floor of the house attached to the foundations in each corner. So down here, if we kept it attached to that foundation, and if we kept it attached up over here where you can't quite see it, if we'd have kept it attached to the foundation with primary anchors, this damage would not have happened. I'm showing you these photographs to reinforce the idea that these houses are really dangerous. If you live in one of these houses, or you have a friend who lives in one of these houses, you should be aware of the risk that you're taking every day that you live in one. The probability of an earthquake is fairly high, as we saw earlier, but you never know, and you may live there forever, and you may live there for 100 years. But if there's a big earthquake and you live in one of these, the probability of severe damage is quite high. Now, Bay Area Retrofit, we do retrofit these. We use the retrofit techniques that were taught to us by the leading seismic retrofit engineer who specializes in these hillside homes, and he's in Los Angeles. Here we're going to look at the two ways that earthquakes attack a house. So right here is the typical house, nothing's happening. The cripple walls are braced with plywood here and here. No earthquake forces. It's just sitting there with gravity. And these houses are all over the Bay Area and the hills, and there's absolutely no problem at all with them being like this. They can resist gravity just fine. Now, however, when earthquake forces go in this direction, it's called cross-slope earthquake shaking. When it goes in this direction, it causes the floor to rotate. What happens here is this tall wall right here, it starts to lean, and when it leans, it causes the whole floor to rotate like this. And the way that's resisted is you put in those primary anchors to make sure that the corners stay attached to the foundation. So if we keep this attached to the foundation and we keep this corner attached to the foundation, we should be in pretty good shape. Now, it's the same thing that we saw earlier, how earthquake forces are trying to push the house down the hill. Same problem, or a different problem, really. This cripple wall is going to unzip because it's a step foundation, and when it does that, the whole floor, wants to fall down the house, unless we can keep the corners attached to the foundation. So we make sure that we put in what's called a primary anchor here, and we put in a primary anchor right here, and maybe some secondary anchors right in here, just if we feel like there's no reason not to put them in. They're really cheap compared to primary anchors. So, some engineers believe that they're a good idea. The engineer that trained me, Nels Roslin in Southern California, he did not think that they were necessary, and he actually looked at earthquake damage personally and saw it firsthand. Here's an example of a secondary foundation anchor. As I mentioned previously, the engineer who trained me did not think that they were necessary. We put them in anyway because there are some university professors that think they are necessary, so we just put a couple. We don't put a whole bunch, just because it's cheap and it's, fairly easy. So let me show you what these are supposed to do. So this right here is a floor joist that supports the floor that you walk on. So there's a floor joist here, all the way along, and the entire floor that you walk on is supported by that. So we don't want this to become dislodged from over here. If this comes this way, then it can lose vertical support, and this hardware is to prevent that. So the way this works is, here's a piece of steel that's attached to the floor joist. Then that is attached to the foundation with epoxy. It's a very, very strong connection right there. And then when the floor joist tries to move, it goes into here, then that force goes down into the here, where because as it tries to pull the epoxy, it can't do it because the epoxy is too strong, and then the floor joist remains where it's supposed to be. Again, the big problem here theoretically is that when this floor joist comes this way, as the earthquake pushes it that way, that it'll lose vertical support, and then it'll have catastrophic collapse. Right now, we're going to be looking at primary anchors. These are called primary anchors because they really do all the work in a Hillside home retrofit. Let's see what they're supposed to do. As we saw before, when this floor right here is going downhill like that, these cripple walls right here on the step foundations, they fail. And when they fail, naturally everything will collapse, and all the force ends up right here in the corner. And then it also ends up right here in the corner as well, because remember, our cripple wall has collapsed. So what we do is we put a primary anchor here, and we put a primary anchor over here. Some engineers say put a secondary anchor here in the middle. We personally don't think that's very necessary, but we put a few of them in, and we just saw secondary anchors just a second ago. So this is what they look like. This is the corner of a house. We bolted into the foundation on the uphill foundation. We bolted into the floor itself, and then we have a diagonal brace that goes into the foundation. So what happens is the floor tries to move this way through all those bolts into the primary anchor that goes into the bolts right here, that goes into the bolts right here, and you save the house. So this is pretty simple. You just put one in each corner, forget about the plywood, don't think of anything else, just put in your primary anchors and you're all set. Now these are not very cheap. You have to drag it, or it really depends, but you have to drag a bunch of steel under the house. You have to make a template, then you have to weld it, and you have to make sure everything lines up. And you can imagine dragging a couple 100 pounds of steel underneath a steep hillside home. But anyway, this is how you retrofit them. Remember, there is another way that earthquake forces cause damage to a hillside home, and that has to do with the rotation of the floor. So here we see when the floor rotates like this, it goes like this, and then it pulls the corner of the foundation off, and then that also tries to go down the hill. And then when the earthquake force goes the opposite direction, it'll try to pull this corner off the foundation. So the primary anchors also fix that problem. So as long as we can secure this corner, as long as we can secure this corner, we don't have to worry about the rotation. So here's another primary anchor that we built. Here's a new foundation that we had to put in down this way. We attached it to, again, a triangulated primary anchor. Up here it's attached to the floor, and that's the way these hillside houses are retrofitted. This is an extreme case of a steep hillside home. It looks like you could probably just kick it and it would fall down the hill. Now the ones we work on are not nearly this steep. So we've done some this steep, but usually they're not quite that steep. And just because you have a step foundation, if it's on a gentle slope, you really don't have anything worried about. The city of Los Angeles has very strict parameters as to what defines a hillside home and how steep they can be. But in general, just your regular old house on a gentle slope, it really doesn't count as a hillside home. So you do need a professional to check. They're very different. These hillside homes, truly the steep ones, are very different. They need to be analyzed very carefully. And I'd say as a rule of thumb, if it feels like it's steep, getting down the hill, that's a good sign that someone should look at it.